Hi, welcome to the ChicoBag podcast, where we strive to leave the world better than we found it. Today, we're joined by Denise Taschereau. She's the co-founder and CEO of Fairware. Now, Fairware, it creates sustainable, custom branded promotional products. Think about trade show swag that perform better, last longer, and create far more meaningful brand engagement than the trinkets and trash that the mindset that the promo industry is known for. So today we're talking about the difference between doing things right and the trinkets and trash. And Denise is going to walk us through it and talk about ROI and how to do promo right. So Denise, welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
So tell me, first of all, how'd you get involved with Fairware, and um, tell me a little bit more about your company.
Yeah, I mean, we actually just had our 20th anniversary party last week. So it's been a while. I think we've known each other much of that time as sort of founding B Corps who've been at it for a very long time. I was working in outdoor retail for Mountain Equipment Co-op, which is the REI of Canada. And I was the head of sustainability there. So I had been working for about 7 years on driving that purpose sustainability agenda at MEC, supply chain, carbon accounting, our foundation, sort of all the things. And towards the end of my tenure there, I was getting itchy feet. I was ready to roll, ready to move on. Wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do, but I was quite compelled by a lot of the emerging entrepreneurs that were going to market with sustainable products and sustainable brands like from the get-go. And you probably would have been one of them. I don't know how old Chico Bags is, but you're exactly the kind of brand that I was starting to admire and think looked like a lot of fun. And around the same time, I got given the events team at MEC, and they were doing, think paddle fest, climbing festivals, mountain biking festivals. They're like, we need merch. And I was suddenly kind of managing and overseeing that team. I was like, great, like how hard can that be? And what I discovered is really hard to get merch that lined up with the values of MEC as a co-op. Couldn't find organic cotton t-shirts, couldn't find lip balm without paraben. Like there was just nothing out there. And of course we were doing it in-house. But we weren't set up to do custom branding on even our own products. So it kind of exposed this industry that no one thinks about. For reference, the promotional products industry is about the same size as outdoor retail, and no one's really thinking about it. It's wild, right?
So it's
So
the
that's
same
kind
size
of
as what?
outdoor retail.
Great. Wow.
Yeah,
That's
it's a
an
big industry. And so for me, it was this marriage of wanting a change and seeing a real problem. Like I started calling around to brands that I admired and I was connected with through the sustainability movement. And everyone was like, whoa, 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 merch, like, trash and trinkets. Like we're scared of it. We don't want to put our brand on it, or we do. And we kind of close our eyes and ignore the consequences. And so that's really how Fairware started, was seeing brands I admire give away terrible things, and thinking that maybe I could fill that gap and do better. So that was the birth of Fairware, and started with two co-founders, both of who have moved on from the company. So I'm kind of leading it on my own, and team of 20 up in Canada. We do about 40% of our business in the US and the rest up here in Canada, and been at it for 2 decades. Trying to make merch better.
ChicoBag's also celebrating 20 years. So we got started right about the
Nice.
same time,
Yeah.
probably
Yeah.
become B Corps, in similar time frame as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, as you know, the B Corp motto is, business is one of the most powerful forces for good in the world if we can harness it, right? So
If we can
becoming a B
harness
Corp
it.
is part of that.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So yeah, it's been a long journey, and maybe before I kind of launch into like what does best practice look like, or what are some examples of things we do well, and things that we've seen in the industry done well. Um, it's changed a lot over 20 years. Like back in the day, it was hard to find merch, and part of our secret sauce was finding brands like Chico and Clean Canteen and, then Mir and then Belleroy. And like, as these brands started to emerge, like we would go and we'd try and support them and work with them directly, and have them in our roster of suppliers. And it was hard. We would call mainstream promotional product suppliers and ask about worker rights and ask about materials and their own operational footprint. And I kid you not, we would get hung up on. People would be like, "What?" Like, I remember calling a water bottle manufacturer that manufactured plastic water bottles in the US and asking about the resin, like the polymer code. Like, is it a 5? Is it a 7? Is it a and he's like, "That's none of your business."
Ah,
That's like 20 years ago, right? So a lot has changed. Now you're seeing the mainstream large, the brands that own the large market share in our industry on the supplier side are either repping product, like they're bringing the Chicos and the Clean Canteens and the Hydro Flasks like into their fold, or they're manufacturing and sourcing themselves products with more sustainable materials. They have auditing teams, they're more transparent around supply chains. It's still, it's still an industry a little bit off the back because they don't have the consumer pressure that direct to consumer brands have. But nonetheless, I kind of wanted to start with that I do feel like there's been these huge leaps and bounds in the last 20 years to like, there should be no excuse not to do better merch if you're a buyer. Like, you can find it. It used to be harder. It's not as hard anymore. So if you're still buying trinkets and trash, like, you can do better. It's easier to do. So I kind of wanted to get that out there because I do think it's been a journey and we've come a long way. There's still a ways to go, but we've come a long way.
yes. And I've been on that journey as well. So thank you for sharing that. The dirty little secret of promo is the trinkets and trash element.
Yeah.
And I know there's some shocking statistics around how much of it ends up, in the trash, within the first year or even the first month. I know I've been to trade shows where I've seen the promo items in the trash can at the trade show where they
Yeah.
were given away. And of course, that's something that everyone's become accustomed to. And when we think about sustainable products, we typically think, oh yeah, those are nice for the environment. That's, we're doing our part. But rarely is there a really strong conversation between the business reasons for doing sustainable merch, right? So there's certainly environmental benefit, there's social benefit, but it also makes sense for business in a lot of cases. And I know this is where you've done most of your work
Mhm.
is helping businesses thrive by also doing good. So can you talk a little bit about some of the mistakes, that companies can make and how you've helped them navigate into better solutions?
Yeah, and I think, the way we go to market at Fairware is there's sort of like a three-prong strategy. It's sustainability, strategy, and service, right? And, we can talk about sustainability all day long, but probably the most important S in there for us is the strategy. And I think that's what's missing. And, you know, merch has never been thought of as a sort of strategic element of the marketing spend and the marketing buy. It is the panic buy. We're like the junk food aisle at the grocery store, right? You go in, you think about your ad spend and your social strategy and your billboards. Those are on your shopping list, right? You're thinking about those. You're budgeting for those. You've planned for those for the year. It's like, you have your shopping list to go in and, buy meals for your family that you meal planned all week. And then you get to the junk food aisle and you're like, but this, and I feel like we've set ourselves up as an industry for a little bit of that. And part of it, to be frank, if you look at curriculum in marketing schools and colleges and universities across North America, if not the world, I have a friend whose kid just got out of a 4-year marketing degree at University of Florida. Never once did merchandise come up as a marketing tactic, right? So like, we're not teaching people how to do it, period, and then how to do it right. So I think there's a lot of work to be done. And in one of the, I'm on, the board of the association. One of the things we're talking about is partnerships with the American Marketing Association and with other kind of super friends so that we can build merch into marketing strategy so people think about it that way. So I think there's sort of a long journey here to get to being more strategic with merch. But what does it look like for us in the day-to-day when clients call us? I think, we talk a lot about defining the objective up at the front end. Like, we get so many calls that are we want to go to, talked about trade shows. Going to a trade show, it's in 2 weeks. I need 1,000 things. I have $2,000. And you're like, okay, so you're going to get 1,002 things. You know, you might be able to nail that and do something really interesting, or there's a fairly significant likelihood that you're going to buy something that's going to be, to your point, if not in the trash at the trade show floor, probably like left on the desk in the hotel room. You know what I mean? So, getting people to get out of that panic buying so that they can be mindful about it, that they can think about it. And using that example, like a way we would approach that is to say, well, what's the show? What's your market? And can we rethink and segment how you're having conversations at the trade show? Like, you might want something to bring people into the booth so they come and visit you. Have a bowl of apples. Like, that's going to get people there, right? Like, just like rethink even how you're approaching it, and then maybe take that $2,000 and put it into, you know, $210 things for qualified leads. In fact, maybe have like 100 of those, and then have 20 things. So when your top clients drop by to say hi, you're giving them something stunning. You're giving them the $30 piece of drinkware. And so, like, for us, it's like, do the apples or the stickers, then have a beautiful ChicoBag or set of reusable cutlery, whatever it might be, like a midpoint piece, and then have a handful of things to actually celebrate the folks that are driving your business. And like, no one thinks about that when they think about a trade show. They think about getting a bowl of trinkets because that's what everybody does, right? So that's a good example of like just taking a everyday tactic that so many companies do, and just asking people like kind of the why and the who, and segment. And I always remember we do a lot of work with Nature's Past cereal. They're an awesome brand. And I always remember, when they're at Expo West, they've always been very strategic and smart about how they go to market, and their merch. They're super mindful about the materials. But I remember back in the day when people were doing USB drives, like they'd put like catalogs on it, or whatever the case might be. They would do 3 different colors, and one color would have all the assets for media and PR, and one color would have all the assets for like trade level buyers. Think of like kind of the massive retail, and then one would be more for independent grocers, and that sort of thing. And again, like, it's almost just it's just a really simple example of how they were strategic, and like people would come into the booth. Didn't matter who was on the team, whatever it was, like blue for media, red for big buyers, yellow for independents. And like, they were just able to get what they needed to people because they thought about it beforehand. Like, you're not able to do that if you're calling the week before. Right. So that's one of the big things. So one of the big mistakes that we see is people skip the strategy. They're not thinking about it. The other thing is just timeline. It's the last minute thing. It's often a junior buyer. What we find is, I can't tell you the number of times we're, chatting with a CMO, they're rolling out a new brand, and maybe it's even like really baking in purpose into the brand, and they have agencies and it's taking forever. And then, 2 minutes before it launches, the marketing assistant calls in a panic saying we need t-shirts. And so again, it's like, how do you get merch to be part of the journey, the marketing journey? How do you get merch to be part of the spend allocation? And just thinking about timelines. So you get better merch. You have more time to do something more beautiful or unique or custom. So that's kind of another piece is timelines. I feel like we coach people a lot on get out ahead of it. Our number one, when we do our carbon accounting as Fairware, and we're looking at one of our very controllable areas, that's the biggest hit for us outside of travel, for us to go do biz dev or go to events, even greater than our own personal travel, is air shipping client projects. And it is heartbreaking when you've built an incredible collection for a brand with sustainable products that just like matches the strategy, and then you put it on a plane because someone didn't make a decision on time, or it was a last minute afterthought. And we've done that so many times, and we talk about it to the client. We tell them about like the coefficients of air shipping. But like, I'll hear my reps out there, and it's part of our tactic now to push decisions faster, right? To close deals faster, is they know how to talk about carbon impact of air shipping as part of the sales process as sales reps. And that's another thing, forgetting timeline. So that's another big one we see. Couple, couple of the other ones that are, like maybe a little more nuanced, is kind of getting to that quantity over quality. There's still a mindset of I need a lot of things, and maybe you don't. Like maybe instead of like, we'll often get people saying, I want to do a kit, I have $20 and I want a bottle and a notebook and a pen and a mouse pad. And you're like, well, you're going to get 4 really low cost, cheap, trinkety things. Like take your $20 and buy something nice. Take your $30 and buy something nice. So giving people a sense of like quality over quantity. The other one that's coming up, and this may be the last one I'll touch on, that we're hearing more and more from our kind of, let's call them sophisticated buyers or seasoned buyers in the impact space, is end of life. And having the conversation. We'll often, like, one of our biggest categories of spend is employee onboarding kits. And we always lead with, this is your moment to anchor your values with a new employee. Do not give them a piece of crap. Like, this is the moment where they are going to literally judge you. And so give them something that drives the kind of values you want. And good examples would be, we always pitch zero waste kits. Reusable tote bag, reusable mug, reusable water bottle, reusable cutlery set. That's like our classic go-to. And in fact, we'll say to folks, put a little note in the cup that says, here's the local, fair trade, organic, locally owned coffee shops around the office, right? Like, here's the top 3 coffee shops everybody loves. Like, make it something that connects people to the local community. We do produce bags, and we have a client that used to put $5 coupons to the local farmers market in the produce bag, and that was a gift for their employee. Like, what a great way to connect employees to values, to community, all the things. So really, like, thinking about the life cycle, like, can it be out there and be used? Can it be out there and can it change the end user's behavior and make them live more sustainably? Like, can you give them the tools to live a lighter footprint while you're giving away your merch? Like, that is so win-win. But what we're seeing is people saying, okay, yeah, but like at the end of life, what's going to happen? Like, I live in Vancouver. Like, can this get recycled in a blue box? Yes or no? Can it get collected in the, zero waste events on the weekends? Yes or no? And if no, our clients are starting to say, look at, like, we're not interested. If there's no end of life solution for this, like, where's the circularity? How do we loop this back into the economy somehow? And if you can't show us how to do that, we don't want that product. And that's a pretty sophisticated, sort of newer requirement that we're seeing as we're pitching merge. So those are some of the things that we try to bring to market to our clients, just to get them to make better decisions. Like, think about this. Like, it's really just think about it. You're spending money. You should think about it.
What's coming through to me is, that idea of thinking about it. And when I call it intention, right?
Mm-hmm.
And your junk food example of, going and buying promo items, it's like your impulse buy. I picture someone on Christmas Eve, going and trying to buy their loved one, Christmas gifts, at the grocery store. And of course, you're going to miss the mark. You're going to
Yeah.
buy a gift that isn't, it's not going to resonate.
No.
It's like, it looks like you just
That's
went
another
down.
good analogy. I'm 100% going to use that analogy.
Like, you went down and bought me a gift at the grocery store,
Yeah.
thanks.
Thanks. Love you
And
too.
when I think about the employee onboarding kits, it's like, how many people have gotten, a promotional item still like wrapped in plastic. And it's just like,
Yeah.
here,
It's like a stress ball. Yeah. You're going to be
here.
super stressed working here. Here's a stress ball. Like, it's like, what are you doing?
Exactly. But I love the idea of making it personal, because then, when I think about gift giving, it's always, when you wrap something nice and you write a personal card, and it's a nice gift, the person spent time thinking about you, thinking about what you liked and giving it to you. And, the same is true when you're giving gifts, as a business or organization, to your employees or to your customers or what
It's
have
the
you.
little touches. We talk a lot, about merchandising. And in fact, I just got a text from someone who was at an event and we sponsored it. And we always sponsor this event. It's a LGBTQ business association in Canada. And part of why we love them is everything they do is beautiful. Their design is beautiful. Their merch is beautiful. Their events are beautiful. And so we had given them tote bags. And when this, colleague of mine just happened to be at the event, walked into the room, all the tote bags were draped over the chairs with a little, like, clip kind of card of the lanyards. Like, everything was just like merchandise. Like, think of merchandising in a retail store. And since she walked in, it was just so visually beautiful, right? And compare that to like the pile of bags on the table as you're coming in. It's like, oh, here's this, here's this. Like it was really, there's a note bag, there's a pen, there's a, like it just was beautiful, right? And so whether it's like personal and you're putting we have a little ebook. I'll send it to you. You can put it in the show notes for onboarding employees and just some like tips and tips and tricks. An example would be we heard about this guy who, larger company, I don't know, say has 40 people in his department. He brings in like a couple of dozen donuts when someone's new and puts it on their desk and then sends a note to the entire department saying, you have to go introduce yourself to this person to get a donut. And then like people are just flooding, like simple tricks, right? Like that's like a $40 investment in building community and place for a new employee. So we've got a little guidebook on some of those things. And one of them to your point, which I love that you picked up on, is if you're giving someone a kit and includes a notebook and you're the manager, write a note in the first page, like welcome, like it's all it takes. You're giving them a stack of post-it notes for their home office, like it just be like welcome, you know Denise, like so glad you're here, cheers Denise. Like it takes 2 seconds and it just creates impact. So again, it's just being mindful, like being thoughtful. I know kind of in a little bit of a different direction. I know you had Elizabeth Wimbush from PPAI, which is our industry association, on a podcast recently. She's doing some work, and has been kind of instrumental in trying to lift the industry so that, you and I are particularly passionate about this. It's our life's work. I could talk all day about it. So could you. Not everybody in the merch industry feels like that. They're chasing the next sale. They don't really care where their stuff comes from. They don't really care who they're selling it to. Liz's work is really trying to uplift the industry. I don't mean to be dismissive, but it's like, people this isn't top of mind. Their clients aren't asking for it. Like maybe in their communities, it's not a priority. It's just not top of mind. So it's been, there's an investment happening right now industry wide to get the industry, distributors, suppliers, the entire supply chain to think about it, and to think about it as strategic differentiation, to think about it as a part of future proofing your business, about being able to connect with future buyers with whom there's like oodles of data that show purpose and impact is a priority. So I'm looking forward to that too. Like I do think that, we'll all rise up if the industry rises up. It's nice to be kind of the sustainable merch brand. We've been that for 20 years. The landscape is getting more competitive, and I think that's a good thing. It's good for us. It's good for the industry. And it's pushing us further to think about what's next in merch and how do we continue to differentiate now that more people can get, Chico bags, or more people can get Clean Canteen in our market than historically. So
Yeah. So I know that, when, in my experience talking with people, a lot of times in an organization, there'll be someone who gets it, right? They
yeah.
understand that, if I give something that is beautiful, that's intentional, that makes someone feel something, I'm going to have the results that I'm looking for. However, a lot of times it's not the cheapest item, right? And then sometimes there's a decision maker, a financial decision maker that doesn't get it. It doesn't understand it. They want the cheap thing. So in your experience, when you talk about return on investment, right? When you think about a marketing spend, how, where have you found success in justifying, that maybe the higher expensed item, coupled with a strategy of maybe a different way of engaging with people, like the example you gave at the trade show, where you keep the high value things for your best customers, whereas the people just walking by that you want to pull into your booth, you give them an apple. So that strategy in line with, a merch philosophy as far as buying something that's sustainable, that has a take back program at the end of its life. How do you justify the return on investment, and or illustrate that to someone who's skeptical?
So again, I'll probably lean into strategy as important as sustainability. So there's a couple of things that you could talk about brand risk, right? So we were involved in a brand rollout of a Canadian beloved brand, and last minute purchase. They decided they were changing the logo, and they're like, oh my goodness, we forgot that we want everyone on the retail floor to have T-shirts. Um, kind of run out of money. We're going to get like the cheapest T-shirt, and the cheapest T-shirt in this context was a T-shirt that is, with a brand that has a track record, in particular in Canada, of having a history of like sweatshop labor, like really, really in the crosshairs of the activist movement in Canada. And again, operations team trying to buy T-shirts, they're pushing our team. Our team's like, well, like, what do we do here? Like, how do we do this? Like, technically this brand, now they're in the FLA, now they're in this, like they meet our criteria. We could sell the T-shirt, but we know reputationally, we know the staff are going to pick up the T-shirt. They're going to look at the label, and like your entire brand rollout is going to like deflate in that moment. Right? Because the student activists that are like campaigning against this brand work for you. Like that's the demographic that works for you. They're going to know it's going to like completely undermine the brand. And in that scenario, we actually went outside of the operations division. We brought in the marketing team and the sustainability team, made the conversation bigger, and like kind of averted a crisis, right? Difficult to measure. It's not necessarily like, oh, we, saved this much money or got this many impressions, but like those are the moments where I think the light bulbs go off and people say, oh, actually this matters. But some more kind of tactical or specific, we did a campaign a couple years ago for Ben and Jerry's. They were rolling out a new flavor in Canada. They wanted to do influencer kits. And they were rolling out cores. You've had Ben and Jerry's cores forever in the US, and because of like weird dairy tariff laws, and I don't even know what, we didn't have cores in Canada, and they had to retrofit some manufacturing stuff in Canada to get it. But Canadians finally got Ben and Jerry's cores. And so we were rolling it out. We were part of that campaign, and we built this really like beautiful kit full of kind of like, it was a play on work out your core, like like an exercise play. And they had, I think it was about 75 influencers they wanted to send kids to. We built beautiful boxes, and part of their thinking was, do we roll this out as like a mass, send coupons or like have sampling in Whole Foods, or like, how do we do all of this? And they're like, why don't we pick like 60 or 70 food influencers in Canada and give them a taste of this? And so we built out this really great thing. We had like towels, there's like recycled content. We had like custom like blue anodized spoons with like a laser etch, work out your core, and Ben and Jerry's on it, like all reusable, all beautiful socks, just like nicely designed things. Like the socks were built so that it was like a split pint. So on one side of your foot and the other side of your foot, you could like put your feet together. And when they were apart, you'd see the core. Like everything was so perfect and mindful. And, it was 70 kits. We deployed the kits, and they got, 250,000 organic impressions, so like they were able to trace, like, and part of it sounds so simple, but they had like a hashtag in the kit, right? So the influencers, of course, are going to, people who aren't working with influencers think it's magic. It's not. And like Hootsuite and, social media, platform, we do a lot of work with them. And we did these little Hoot kits for them. And this is a good example where sometimes you can have a low cost item that has sustainable attributes and drives strategy. Recycled envelope. In the envelope was a pin back button. All the backings, everything on that pin is made, all the backings, steel backings for pin back buttons in North America are made in Wisconsin. FSC paper made here in Vancouver. We had some stickers made in Canada. Custom envelope. The whole thing's like $3, sub $3. And they were just called like Hoot Kits, and it was like, you're awesome. That's what it said on the front. And on the back, and they had a little call to action card in the kit with a hashtag Hootswag. And then they would just, people on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, people would get their little kits, and sometimes that would go with like a little owlie or little other things, right? But they'd get them, and then they just generated end user content. Like their fans were generating content for them. And often I talk to like, especially young tech startups, and they're like, we need hoodies and we need this and what we need. And I'm like, no, you don't. You need stickers. You can't afford hoodies. Get stickers. You know what I mean? Like, you can't afford the water bottle. So get the sticker for someone to put on their water bottle, and then they'll walk around with your brand, right? So again, those sorts of results where, you're as simple as putting a hashtag on it. So that kind of ROI. But I saw a slide recently, we're talking a lot about this at the industry association, and, I was at an event recently in Dallas, and a couple of things came up. One was a friend of mine said something that I'd never heard before, but merch is the only marketing medium that people thank you for.
If
Like
they thank you, that they
you
thank you
don't
for.
deliver an ad and they're like, oh yeah, I saw that ad. I saw your billboard. Thanks. Um, so there's a lot of opportunity to kind of make it matter. But one of the slides I've seen is where, the industry is looking at kind of a global campaign to kind of reset merch as a strategic part of the marketing, kind of toolkit. And I saw an ad for, kind of a new hipster soda brand, and they showed the cost of these like super cool tracksuits. They did just like a pink on pink and like really cool versus an ad spend, like a TV ad spend. It was like 8 million for the TV ad spend, and it was, about, I don't know, say $100 for the tracksuit set, of which they got 200, of which they gave to influencers. And like, it was like, okay, like that was a $10,000 spend on like high-end, beautiful, like probably Bella canvas, tracksuits. And then there's an $8 million 30-second TV ad, right? So I think what we need to do as an industry is start to get those stats, start to show like the impressions, the average, like we have the stats on how long the average person keeps a t-shirt that they like. If you do a good t-shirt and they keep it, compared to a once and done t-shirts, a TV slot, or a social media spend. So that's, I think, where we need to evolve, is getting some of those brass tacks. We've got it. Some of the cost per impression of good merch, if they keep it, and that's what your point was at the very beginning of this, is you have to make it matter. And that's where the investment in quality comes, is you're giving someone something that if you do it right, they're going to keep it. And your ROI, your cost per impression, every time they put on the t-shirt, or every time they, like I'm drinking a travel mug, like obviously I have access to a lot of these, but I'm drinking one that was given to me about 3 years ago now. It's a buying group I'm in. It's a beautiful mug. I look at this thing every day, right? And like when you think about that cost per impression of a piece of product that's awesome, right? This is not a cheap mug. It's a hydro flask. But as a result, I'm keeping it, and I've kept it. I could have we sell tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of mugs. I have access to any mug I want, but I like this one because it's a beautiful mug. It's a high quality mug. And so people need to understand that investment in cost per impression. A line I use a lot when we're talking about t-shirts with folks is, I'm like, just, imagine you're opening your t-shirt drawer. Now, when I imagine I open my t-shirt drawer, I probably have like 30 t-shirts in my t-shirt drawer. And I wear the same probably 4 to 5 t-shirts all the time, right? How do we get you that t-shirt? Let's build you that t-shirt. You
Yeah.
want to be that t-shirt. That t-shirt is soft. That t-shirt's organic. That t-shirt's got, a soft hand, phthalate-free plastisol or a water-based ink. And yeah, that t-shirt is going to be $24 instead of $18, or $17 instead of $12. And like, think about your favorite t-shirt and think about the relationship you have with whomever gave it to you, right? Or the team that you love and adore, so you wear it every Sunday on game day. Like, we want that experience, right? Spend the extra $2 and put a love note in the back, right? Every time somebody puts a t-shirt over their head and they read a little note that says like, you're the best, thanks, ChicoBags. Like, they just think about you all the time. Like, it's a little warm fuzzy
Yeah.
once a
I, I,
week, you know?
I, th- I think it's a great point, because all of us are just swimming in so much stuff. And so thinking of the idea, how do I make this somebody's favorite,
Yeah.
right? When you have 100 cups and you're using that one every day,
Yeah.
I guess the goal of everyone as marketers is, how do you give something a gift that could be their favorite?
And I think, the other, maybe the other piece to touch on here is, so I do think like you can measure, like you can either measure if you want social impressions, like put a hashtag in your, like have a call to action as part of your merch experience. That's a really simple way to see what your return might be if people start to pick up on that hashtag. There are ways to kind of look at and measure, cost per impression. If you assume the person is going to, somebody works for you, you put a, it sounds super boring, but I'm a big fan of mouse pads as part of onboarding kits because you just put your values, put your mission statement, you put whatever you want that's important to you. Your employees looking at every day, all day long. Like your cost per impression is like fractions of a penny to like anchor your values in someone's brain. It's just how it works. So there is ways to measure it. Another thing too is just to really think about, how, like, again, how to kind of pivot your spend. Like we know you need the low cost stuff, so do that right. There's opportunity. There are products you can get that I think are a good fit on the low cost front. I come back to pin back buttons or enamel pins or stickers or things that people will use, and they're kind of on trend right now. But it's just really pivoting, your spend to tragedy to strategy. And one of the things that we're seeing that I think is really cool. And one of the things that I think our industry needs to talk about more is enabling agency and choice. And so I know we've talked about this in the past, but something we're looking to do or talking to our clients about doing is if you're doing a gift campaign or gift drop, are there ways to say you can have option A, option B, or option C? So we do this a lot. We did a program with Spotify a couple years ago, and they wanted to do a gift. It was like really put, like kind of maybe still in the COVID times where people weren't meeting. And we built a collection for them, and every product was like deep impact, made free, Patagonia, prosperity candles, like beautiful product, predominantly B Corp, diverse owned, like manufacturers and makers. It was a really beautiful collection. And you could pick what you wanted. But the thing that they brought to the front, which I loved, is or you could pick nothing. And if you said, I don't need a thing, I don't need another pack or another this or another that, you were able to deploy the value that was given to everybody else to a series of charitable organizations that they had. So you could be like, I want the pack, or I want to give to Black Girls Code, which was one of the charities, right? And so we've built on that. We did a campaign for a FSC, like kind of a good forestry company that has mills all over the place. It was again during COVID, and they were trying to incent people to get vaccinations. So Canadian-based brand, but huge operations in the U.S. And just like there was such a different political climate, and there was just such a different kind of take up of vaccines depending on what region they were operating. And so we built his store, which was, get vaccinated, show your proof of vaccination, and you'd get, a link and a coupon into the store. And there were some like really beautiful products. And in one of the choices was a couple of health charities. And like we're seeing like 10-15% of people are like, I don't need a thing, I'll donate. And so they were able to raise money for a health charity, or people got the Yeti mug or whatever it is they chose. So I think that's another emerging trend I'm really excited about, is like, how do we enable people to have agency? Like, we know merch works, like people love it, right? There's an image I always reference at a soccer game in the UK, and Sir Paul McCartney, who probably has a net worth of $6 billion or something, is literally elbowing people out of the way and reaching to get the t-shirt that was like shot out of the cannon, like probably the $4 t-shirt. And like, it's just such a, like, to me, that image really reflects like people love merch. Like they really
Yeah.
love it. And even people who don't need merch, like are, kind of, pushing people out of the way to get the Canon t-shirt. And, so I do think like doing it right and understanding that there's an ROI, people love it. And if you do it right, it's not going to end up in the trash can, and you're going to have a fan.
Yeah, I love the idea of giving people a choice. I've been to conferences where instead of them giving a gift bag full of stuff, you don't get to choose. I love going into a gift room and just picking and choosing the things I want,
Yeah.
which also gives the brand feedback, uh,
Yeah.
as
Sure
well
does.
as
That's a
what,
great point.
to let people know, what like.
Yeah, like what
Um,
works, right? And then it's like, okay, let's invest in that.
yeah,
Yeah, no, that's a really I kind of haven't thought of it that way, but it's almost like a live like voting scenario of like we love, this is your future merch program because this is what everybody picked. We sold out. I remember doing a t-shirt program for a women's conference, and one of the pieces we did was just a t-shirt that said feminist on it in English and French. And we had like almost every night we were calling the silk screener doing another run. Like they were just gone. They were gone. You could barely unpack them out of the box, and there was so it's like, wow, okay, I guess that like who knew? You know what I mean? Like everybody wants a feminist t-shirt. That's what we learned. Everyone in the world. It was a global conference, but sometimes you just don't know what's going to work, right? We had a lot of merch there, and that one was just the winner.
that's great.
Yeah,
You talked about cost per impression, and I know, in the marketing advertising world, this is a common way to kind of look at different ad spends, whether you're buying billboards or you're buying merch, looking at cost per impression is a way to determine the return on investment, right? And to your point, a durable item that is someone's favorite will have a lower cost per impression than even a cheap item that's used once that ends up in the trash. Um, However, there's also the notion of and we're talking about positive impressions, but there's also the notion of negative impressions. For example, I have some eco-friendly pens. I have a pen holder here. I got some eco-friendly pens. This one's cardboard, very eco-friendly material. This one's bamboo. Neither one of them work. And
yeah,
so when I look at the brand that's on these pens, even though they made the right choice and the right materials, the quality is
yeah.
terrible. And my
It's like getting an
impression,
ugly organic cotton t-shirt. It's the same thing. Like,
yes,
you know what I mean? Like you
like
still
an
have to like,
ill-fitting, scratchy something,
yeah,
and in my t-shirt drawer, I have a favorite t-shirt and it is a promo item and I wear it all the
yeah.
time because it's high quality. So let's talk about negative impressions and reputational risk and some of the kind of dark side of I guess promo that really could kill a brand.
So I think there's you kind of nailed it with that example, right? Like just because it's recycled doesn't mean it's a great choice, right? And like if it's a low quality, non-functioning, bad piece of merch, it's a bad piece of merch. It doesn't matter if it's sustainable. If you get a gorgeous organic cotton t-shirt that's manufactured in a sweatshop, like you're not moving the dial in the direction we all want to move the dial, right? So like just understanding those risk impacts. So I think, that's that's just conversations that I think as people who sell merch, you have to be brave enough to have the conversation. So when someone says, "Oh, I need a pen for like 35 cents," that we all know isn't going to work. We as people in the industry that are out there selling like have to challenge folks. And like I mean, there's categories of clients we don't work with. Like we don't work in oil and gas, and like we say no. But then there's these moments where we have clients we love, and we're like, oh, this is a bad idea, right? And I talked about stress balls. Again, not naming names, but like we had a client who wanted to get stress balls, in the shape of something that related to their product, and I'm not going to say it because everyone will know who it is. And we're like, hard no, like this is the worst idea ever. This is like open cell phone that is just landfill fodder. You cannot put your logo on this. You are like a B Corp, a sustainable brand. And so sometimes you have to remind people. And it takes a lot of courage when your day job, especially in our industry where a fair number of our industry sales reps are commission. Like we're still an industry where the majority of the sales reps in this industry are 100% commission, which again is like, to me, it's, it's not how we roll for a lot of reasons. But one of them is there's like a perverse incentive to sell the thing and don't ask questions, right? So that's part of the education, I think, on the industry side. But there is huge brand risk. I mean, there, sorry, I'm just getting over a cold, but there's a lot of examples of cadmium in the inks of the McDonald glasses. We had, part of the reason that this industry ended up on my radar back in the day when I was at MEC and being like, how hard can this be? Is I got a I got a cycling vest from a beloved financial institution that's part of the kind of movement for values based banking. They're incredible impact and purpose driven brand. And their vest was made in Myanmar. It was made in Burma, and we're talking like 25 years ago. Like Canada had formal sanctions against manufacturing in Myanmar because of human rights abuses, and it's like this is going to end up on the front page of the Globe and Mail, which is like our New York Times, right? Like you don't want, you know, this to happen to your brand, and someone has to be thinking about this. Like you have to connect the dots through your value chain, um, or someone's going to find out. And if that someone is disgruntled, this is a great story, right? And so there's a lot of those, just a lot of those stories of people, again, great brands putting their logo on terrible merch and people calling them out. The most common place we see it, which isn't always in the headlines, is we have people calling us. I'll give you a really good example. We get calls not infrequently, either from employees that are kind of like, no one cares about this, but I do. So like and I'm in charge of it. So let's go, and they're so excited and they're like activating their values in their workplace, almost like as an active, you know, like so
Rebellion.
that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
But the other thing we get is it is not uncommon for us to get calls from people who say, I just came back from a trade show, or I'm in charge of merch, and we just got called out on the trade show floor by someone walking by for having terrible merch. And we're an environmental consulting firm, and we were giving away, PVC keychains, and we got called out on the show floor, and we need help. Like that is not an uncommon call. And so again, like that brand risk, you're recruiting employees, you're out at a trade show, especially if you're a purpose-driven brand, especially if you're hiring Gen Zs and below. You you have to connect your dots. So your employees are going to look at the logo, like look at the brand. And if it's off, you know, it's a reflection of your values. So I think that is a real risk. Our classic is like if you're an organic food company and you're not printing on organic cotton totes or organic cotton t-shirts, at a minimum RPET, at a minimum like sustainable attributes. Like if your entire brand is anchored in recycling or purpose or impact or organic supply chains, like you can't cheap out on your merch. Like it is, there's a lot of brands that like their only brand experience in a physical way is their merch. Think of service organizations, think of financial institutions, insurance companies. Like the only place someone can touch and feel their brand is their merch. And you're just like, oh, and it sucks. So what does that say about your brand? It's a huge risk I think people underestimate all the time.
Yeah, I think what comes to mind for me are cancer-related organizations giving away merch that has known
Like
carcinogens.
parapets in it? Yeah, awkward. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, yay, let's raise money for cancer by giving away, a bunch
Yeah.
of, carcinogenic items.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just it's closing the loop. Like I think really this whole conversation, it's be mindful about your merch. It should be part of your strategy. Like what's your client acquisition journey and what's your client retention journey? Our brands that do it best, their merch is linked to their employee acquisition, employee retention, to their client acquisition, their client retention, their donor acquisition, their donor retention. Like what is your journey as an organization? It could be getting students to your university. It could, whatever it is, link your merch like you would any other marketing, tactic to what matters to your process as an organization, to your flow, your sales flow as an organization, or your donor engagement or community engagement flow. If you're not doing that, you're missing out on opportunity.
I think you said it beautifully. That's where you start, right? And that's how, by planning, by mapping it out, you're doing it with intention. You're planning ahead to reduce, air shipment, like you
Yeah.
said. You're
Yeah.
not buying the junk food, on Christmas Eve. You are doing things with intention. Some of that so that you're having the results that you want. So you have the return on investment, that you're not creating reputational harm. Those people that spoke up at the trade show are very generous. Most people don't say a thing, and it's a silent killer of brands, and people just don't even know what's going wrong. So you're a wealth of information. How do people get, I know you have a blog, and I know you have a lot of information on your website. So how can people learn more?
So fairware.com is, it's our website. If you go into resources, we've got toolkits, we've got guides, on sustainable textiles, on all sorts of things. We're huge fans of sharing what we know. Our blog is great. You just kind of Google Fairware, other podcasts will show up. But, there's also a lot going on at PPAI, which is, the Promotional Products Association International, and the first chair that's not American. So kind of bringing a little bit of a wider lens also to the association. But Liz and the team there are doing a ton of work. So, an example would be, and this has an impact for an end buyer. They just did a podcast on extended producer responsibility, on packaging, EPR laws on packaging, state by state, province by province. And like end users just have to understand that. They have to be part of that conversation. Like they're in the value chain where if you're getting a huge, merch campaign out the door and there's a lot of packaging involved with it, like you're part of the value chain in terms of like reporting and being accountable. So there's actually a lot of great content coming out of PPAI as well. And it's just ppai.org. And folks can click the sustainability button and check things out there as well.
Great. Thank you so much, Denise.
Thanks a ton. This has been great. I think, you and I have been fighting the fight for a long time. And I just also want to say I appreciate your perseverance and like, let's keep at it. And we're moving the dial. And sometimes it doesn't feel like it, but we are, and you're a huge piece of it. So thanks for being part of the movement in this industry.
Yeah. And I love that it's coming together, that doing good is also the most profitable thing a business can do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Love
I
it.
love that that's coming together. So thank you
Yeah.
so much, Denise.
Thanks a ton.